That was a massive whiff by the Browns. And, I think that might be where the big rift between Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski came into play, because I think obviously Andrew Berry took a liking to Shedeur Sanders, and I think he probably would have taken Shedeur Sanders earlier in the draft. But this is just my belief. Again, no reporting, no facts, no nothing. This is just my speculation. But I'm speculating that Kevin Stefanski is the one who really fell in love with Dillon Gabriel, made the strong push to get Dillon Gabriel. And so I think Andrew Berry said, okay, fine. Then this is what I'm going to do at the top of the draft. I'm going to trade back, take some of these players, fill out the roster where I want to. And then, Kevin got his wish to get Dillon. It's just such a shame because, we could have had the offensive guard that the Patriots took after that Dillon Gabriel pick, Jared Wilson. We could have had Xavier Watts, who I wanted at that pick. I wanted Xavier Watts, the safety who the Falcons ended up taking out of Notre Dame. I wanted him in the second round, okay? And when he was available late third round, it was like that was a no-brainer pick. We should have taken him. Instead, we wasted a pick on Dillon Gabriel, who I don't think will ever be suitable for the NFL. He might be able to fill in relief here and there, maybe take a spot start as a backup a couple times over his career. But, the whole sentiment that, Dillon Gabriel's got a long NFL career, he'll be a backup in this league for a long time, that I don't see as the future.
The Cleveland Browns offensive line coach just held one of the most shocking, disturbing, and career-ending press conferences in NFL history. And if Jimmy Haslam and Andrew Berry care about being responsible, or really want to keep Shedeur Sanders safe, this coach should clean out his office right away. What was supposed to be a normal media availability in the middle of the week turned into a chance for the coach to talk about preparation, performance issues, and the offensive line's terrible mistakes. Instead, it turned into a masterclass in deflection, excuses, and blame shifting that showed exactly why this unit has been the worst in football and why Sanders has been punished more than anyone else all season. Every answer, every deflection, and every carefully worded excuse showed that the coach was not cut out for the NFL. And by the end of this press conference, there was no doubt that he needed to be fired right away. Let's start with the technical talk that showed real skill before everything fell apart and people started making excuses. When asked how to deal with Buffalo's complicated pre-snap disguises and post-snap rotations, the coach gave what at first seemed like a well-thought-out answer. He talked about how the Bills' defensive front would show different looks at the line of scrimmage before actually covering someone. The Buffalo defenders are especially good at hiding their intentions because they have all played in Sean McDermott's system for 30 years. Offensive linemen need to read alignments and make adjustments after the snap based on what actually happens, not what they think will happen. This is real coaching material. Knowing that Buffalo defenders lie with their first alignments, knowing how important it is for offensive linemen to have their eyes in the right places to make secondary responses, and talking about the AAA framework of alignment, assignment, and adjustment. This is all good positional coaching theory. The coach talked about see a little, see a lot combinations, making sure that offensive linemen can react in fractions of a second when the ball changes hands, and giving the quarterback options in the run game while knowing that protection pictures will change after the snap. That's how things are in the big city. We understand. But we need to know where to look in order to do our jobs. The phrase, life in the big city, meant that NFL defenses make things harder and more confusing on purpose, and that offensive linemen have to quickly process information and change their plans. Any good position coach should know and be able to explain this basic idea about coaching in the NFL. So far, there hasn't been anything controversial or problematic, just normal technical talk about how to deal with complex defenses. The praise for Joel Bitonio was over the top and deserved. I wouldn't give him up for anyone. That's all there is to it. His play on Sundays has been great, not just what I've said about how I feel about him in the meeting room and what he does for the Browns. The coach then talked about how Bitonio can't even walk on Tuesdays because he has to take care of his injuries, but he still shows up on Sundays and plays at a Pro Bowl. Every week, he blows me away, the way he stands up for the Browns and his teammates. I have a lot of respect for Joel Bitonio. This praise is real and important. Bitonio is a true professional who shows how to be a tough and experienced leader. His ability to play at a high level, even though he can't practice because of physical problems, is exactly what NFL players need to be adaptable and professional. Keep in mind Bitonio's ability to adapt and do well even when things aren't going well, because this will be very important when we look at the coach's excuses later. The talk about Cam Robinson, the left tackle they got in a trade during the season, was also good.
You trade for someone in the middle of the year, and then you hear rumors about who they are.
Cam Robinson is really cool. He plays football. He always does things the right way. Working with him has been a pleasure. Robinson joined the team in the middle of the season. He had to learn new systems and protections, get used to his new teammates, and still play well. Again, pay attention to the praise for adaptability and professionalism. A player who was able to handle the challenges and changes in the middle of the season and still play well. The coach also talked about how Ethan Posich helped with protection calls and changes when he was healthy earlier in the season. Now that Luke Whippler is in charge, he is doing a great job of handling those communication duties. This is what normal positional coaching looks like: giving people jobs, making backup plans in case of injuries, and making sure that communication systems keep working even when people leave. When talking about DeJuan Jones's growth as a right tackle, the coach gave positive feedback about how Jones was able to overcome his early problems with silent count procedures, get better at setting square and landing his punch, and use his great strength and power in both protection and the run game. He is a strong young man and can move you in the run game and protect you when he gets his hands on you. The coach praised progress while also pointing out areas where more work is needed. This is exactly the kind of coaching that young offensive linemen need to grow. All of this, the technical talk, the praise for the players, and the analysis of their development, shows that the NFL position coach is doing a good job. It's not anything special or brilliant, but it's the kind of professionalism you would expect from any offensive line coach at this level. And then the question that showed everything came up. The question that should lead to immediate firing. The question that made the coach's mask fall off completely and show exactly why this offensive line has done so poorly. You say this is the hardest year of your career, but then you can't stop talking about how great these guys are. Is it just that you don't know who's going to be there for you that makes this so hard? This was an easy question. A great chance to talk about how to deal with injuries, roster limits, and the usual problems that every NFL position coach has to deal with when players leave. A good coach would take that question and talk about how hard it is to keep things going when players get hurt, how hard it is to add new players in the middle of the season, and how hard it is to keep multiple players ready when you're not sure if they'll be available. All of that would have been completely fair, honest, and professional. This is what the coach of the offensive line really said, though. Yeah, I think it's hard when quarterbacks have different cadences and ways of doing things. A lot of changes have been made to the room. I believe that both coaches and offensive linemen are creatures of habit. We'd like things to stay the same. We don't live that way. We understand, but we can still want. Read those lines again. Take in what was really said. The offensive line coach immediately blamed the quarterbacks when asked about real problems like injuries and roster changes. This year has been the hardest of his career because he has had to work with different quarterbacks who have different rhythms and ways of doing things. Not injuries, not a lack of talent, not the complexity of the scheme, but different quarterback cadences. This is the worst kind of coaching malpractice. To keep protection standards high no matter who is taking snaps, professional offensive line coaches must get their units ready to work with any quarterback. This means that they need to be able to quickly adapt to different cadences and ways of communicating.
That's not a special requirement.
It's a basic job description. Throughout their careers, offensive linemen work with many different quarterbacks. There are several quarterbacks who take reps during training camp. Backup quarterbacks have to play when the starters get hurt. The teams either draft new players or sign free agents who have been around for a while. The ability to quickly adjust to different rhythms isn't optional or unusual. It is completely necessary. And this coach just said that his biggest problem this season is adapting to the basics. He basically said that Shedeur Sanders was to blame for the offensive line's constant problems, saying that Sanders' cadence and way of talking were to blame, instead of admitting that he couldn't get players ready for normal NFL changes. That's not how to coach. That's the most pathetic kind of excuse. But it got a lot worse. The coach went on. I was so lucky. I went to Stanford for a long time. I think I started the same 5 guys for 3 years in a row and never had anyone miss a play. And I was a better coach back then. Those last 5 words should have gotten him fired right away. Back then, I was a better coach. This coach just came out and said that he only works well when everything is perfect, when he has the right amount of stability and continuity, and when nothing goes wrong. He said that when things are hard, he does a worse job, that he can't keep up with the usual NFL challenges and still do well. That's something that would disqualify any professional coach at any level, but especially in the NFL, where problems are always going to happen. Adversity is what makes the NFL what it is. Every week, people get hurt. There is always turnover on the roster. Plans for the game change depending on who the other team is. Things change quickly from season to season.
NFL quality coaches are different from those who can't handle the demands of the professional level because they can keep up their performance standards even when things get tough. And this offensive line coach just publicly admitted that he is in the latter group, saying that he was better when everything was easy and perfect at Stanford. This means that he has had a hard time this year in Cleveland because things have not been easy. Consider what that confession means. This coach says he can only win if he has the same 5 starters for 3 years in a row and no injuries. That isn't how things work in the NFL. That's a dream that almost never comes true in the pros. And by saying he needs those fantasy conditions to be effective, he's also saying he can't do his job well in real NFL situations. That kind of honesty could end your career and should lead to immediate firing. The excuse kept going. We've had guys thrown in who have come into the building and started taking reps with the ones the same day they got here in the last few weeks. And that's not the kind of continuity you want. You want those 5 guys to practice together every time because it's so important. Everything is practice. You hope that it will work the right way in the game. Let's go through everything wrong with that statement one by one, because it's a complete list of coaching failures at many levels. First, if players are coming into the building and immediately taking first-team reps because no one else is ready, that is a huge failure in depth development. Professional position coaches are in charge of keeping depth charts up to date so that backup players are ready to fill in when injuries happen. If emergency signings are starting right away because no one on the current roster was ready, that's a failure of coaching. The offensive line coach didn't help the players already on the team get better, didn't make sure there was enough depth, and didn't make backup plans. Second, the complaint about not having continuity ignores the fact that keeping up performance despite roster changes is what sets NFL-level coaching apart from college-level coaching. In college football, coaches can sometimes count on having the same players for more than one season, which helps them build chemistry and communication over time with rosters that don't change much. That kind of luxury doesn't happen very often in the NFL. Injuries happen all the time. Free agency changes the teams. New players come with draft picks. Coaches need to come up with systems and ways of teaching that help new players fit in quickly and play at a professional level right away. This coach's longing for his Stanford days, when he had 3 years of perfect continuity, shows that he hasn't changed how he coaches to meet the needs of the professional level. He still coaches like he's in college, expecting things to go perfectly, which doesn't happen in the NFL. He can't change his methods when things don't go as planned. That is a basic failure of professional growth. He should have changed his coaching style to fit the NFL, but instead he's whining that the NFL isn't like Stanford. Third, and most damningly, the phrase, "practice is everything and then you hope it transfers to the game the right way," shows a huge philosophical failure at the heart of his coaching style. You don't want practice to carry over to games. You coach practice in certain ways that make sure transfer happens. You set up practice situations and settings that are like those in a game and put pressure on the players. You teach skills and techniques that work in real games, not just in practice settings where you can control everything. You prepare players so well that their practice habits automatically and inevitably show up on Sunday because you planned the preparation to make that happen. Hoping things will work out isn't a way to coach. When you haven't done the work needed to succeed, you turn to hope. When you haven't done enough planning and are just hoping for the best instead of following through. This coach just said that his way of turning practice into game performance is based on hope.
The Browns were waiting for the investigation into the incident to finish before they could continue negotiating after the charges against Judkins were dropped. The great practice has been practices and hoping that the skills will somehow magically transfer instead of carefully planning for the transfer to happen. But this is where the press conference went from bad to worse, and the coach's excuses became clear lies and deflection. After a while of complaining about how hard different quarterbacks have made his job, the coach was asked specifically about Shedeur Sanders' communication with the offensive line and his understanding of protection schemes after framing quarterback variation as a major issue. Pay close attention to what he says. "Yes, I've seen him ask better questions every week and try to figure out how we're doing things and want to be a part of those talks. For example, today we just finished a walkthrough and he asked, 'Who was in charge of that yesterday?' Those are great questions. Quarterbacks want to know where they can be safe. That's not too much to ask, and the fact that he's completely aware of it will help him keep moving forward. I think he's doing a great job. I think it's cool to see how Tommy and Moose communicate with each other and how they are helping this young quarterback grow." Stop it. Stop. Make sure that everyone understands what just happened in this exchange. It's the smoking gun that shows the coach's earlier complaints were just lies, meant to shift blame away from his own mistakes. The coach spent the first part of the press conference talking about how this has been the hardest year of his career because he has had to work with different quarterbacks who have different cadences. He said that the different styles of quarterbacks were a major reason why the offensive line was having problems. He said that getting used to different quarterbacks is an impossible task. But when asked directly about Shedeur Sanders, he says the following: "Sanders is asking better questions every week, which means he is actively learning more about and getting more involved with protection ideas. Sanders is trying to figure out how protections are being handled, which means he's studying the system and looking for more information. Sanders wants to be part of discussions about assignments, which means he's taking the lead instead of just listening to what others say. Who is in charge of that element is one of the great questions Sanders asks. In other words, he's carefully considering the details and responsibilities of protection. Sanders is completely in sync with how the offensive line works, which means he knows the system inside and out. Sanders is doing a good job, which means that his performance and preparation are up to or above par. So Sanders is doing everything right, to the letter. He is communicating in a proactive and useful way. He's picking up the system quickly. He's asking smart questions that show he is really interested and understands. He's taking the initiative to learn more about protection than just what he has to do. He's playing the kind of quarterback that should make an offensive line coach's job easier, not harder. A quarterback who talks to and prepares the offensive line so they can do well. But this same coach wants to make different quarterbacks the main challenge, which makes this the hardest year of his career. That's not just contradictory, it's also dishonest and meant to confuse. He says that Sanders is to blame for the offensive line's problems, but he also says that Sanders does better than expected in every area of communication and preparation. He's making Sanders look like a problem, when Sanders is actually doing more than most rookie quarterbacks to help the offensive line do well. The cognitive dissonance is just mind-blowing. If Sanders is asking better questions every week, if he's getting more involved with protection concepts, and if he's showing that he understands and is taking the lead, then how is quarterback variation the main problem? The obvious answer is that the challenge isn't really quarterback variation. The problem is that the offensive line coach can't build depth, keep players healthy, turn practice into game performance, or own up to his own mistakes. Sanders isn't the issue. The problem is the coaching. And this press conference, through the coach's own contradictory statements, accidentally proved it beyond a shadow of a doubt. He praised Sanders but blamed the quarterbacks. He said that Sanders was great at talking to people, but he also complained about the way quarterbacks called plays. He said Sanders is doing a good job, but that the quarterback's inconsistency makes his job impossible. If you don't know that the coach is trying to shift blame from his own mistakes to easy targets, none of that makes sense. Remember when the coach said that Joel Bitonio played at a Pro Bowl level even though he couldn't practice all week, couldn't walk on Tuesdays, and had physical problems that would have kept most players out of the game? Bitonio is able to adapt to difficult situations and still play at an elite level. That's the professionalism and ability to change that the coach praised a lot. Do you remember when the coach said nice things about Cam Robinson for joining the team in the middle of the season and playing well right away, even though he had to learn new systems and protections? Robinson was able to adjust to difficult situations. The coach praised that level of professionalism.
But when it comes to getting used to different quarterback cadences, which is a lot easier than playing through an injury or joining a new team in the middle of the season, all of a sudden, that's the hardest thing the coach has ever had to do. That doesn't make sense unless you see it as making excuses instead of being honest. If Bitonio can play well without practicing, and Robinson can do well after trades in the middle of the season, then an NFL offensive line coach should be able to adjust to different quarterback cadences without seeing it as a career-defining challenge. The difference is that Bitonio and Robinson are real professionals who can handle anything and do a good job. The coach of the offensive line is making excuses for why normal NFL challenges make his job too hard. That difference is a great example of why the players should be praised and the coach should be fired right away. The inside information that ended the segment confirmed what common sense and film study have been saying all season. The offensive line is the biggest worry going into the 2026 season. Andrew Berry and Jimmy Haslam want to get rid of everyone in that department. They have the picks. They need to use these picks to put the right people around Shedeur so he can be great. The players they have right now, like journeyman offensive linemen, aren't the ones who are guaranteed to help Shedeur succeed. Get rid of the bad people in that department. Those words show that the leaders of the organization know that things are going wrong on a regular basis. The current offensive line coaching and players have failed miserably. The journeymen on the roster right now can't protect Sanders well enough. The coaching hasn't built up depth or kept up performance, so big changes are needed and will happen. This isn't just a guess. This is information from the inside about plans that are already in place. Berry and Haslam have had enough. They know that the offensive line coach hasn't developed talent, hasn't prepared depth, hasn't adjusted to the realities of the NFL, hasn't taken responsibility, and, most importantly, has tried to blame the franchise quarterback for his own mistakes. When trying to build something long-lasting around a young quarterback who is the future of the team, you can't accept that kind of deflection and excuse. The offensive line coach should be fired right away. Not only because of the poor performance that is clear every Sunday, but also because of this press conference that showed he can't take responsibility, his longing for college-level continuity that doesn't exist in the NFL, his admission that he's only effective when everything is perfect, and his disgusting attempt to blame Shedeur Sanders for protection failures while also admitting that Sanders does everything right in preparation and communication. Sanders should get more. He needs coaches who will protect him instead of blaming him. He needs coaches who can deal with the realities of the NFL instead of hoping for Stanford-level stability. He needs coaches who can turn practice into game performance instead of just hoping things will work out. And he's about to get exactly that, because this press conference was the last straw for a coach who lost his job because he couldn't take responsibility for the team's failures. If this breakdown of the most career-ending press conference in recent memory makes you think the offensive line coach needs to be fired right away, hit the like button. Leave your thoughts in the comments about what kind of coach Cleveland needs to really protect Shedeur Sanders instead of making up excuses. Also, subscribe with notifications on because this coaching staff change is going to happen. Things are changing, and we'll give you an honest look at whether the Browns finally build the infrastructure that their franchise quarterback really needs and deserves. This is about being responsible and making sure that coaches are held accountable when they blame players for their own mistakes.